When you come to Jersey, as we have this week, you realize at once that the whole island is geared towards tourism, to bringing the visitors in. But ironically, the island's architecture is dominated by buildings designed to keep people out, particularly the French. Jersey was originally part of Normandy, and when the Duke of that name became King of England by conquest in 1066, Jersey came with him. And for the following 800 years, the French desperately tried to get this and the other Channel Islands back. The most famous and final attempt by the French began on this rocky bit of coast on the 6th of January 1781. At low tide, the Baron de Roulecourt and his army landed here at a place considered so dangerous that no one thought they would ever dare. In the process, 200 French soldiers were killed, most of them drowned. The Baron marched on the capital, St. Helier, and forced the governor to surrender. But the army garrison, under a Major Pearson, wouldn't give up the fight, and the following morning a fierce battle took place in the Royal Square. The pub, named after Major Pearson, still bears the marks of that engagement of more than 200 years ago. At the height of the action, a musket ball hit Pearson in the chest, and he fell dying. He lies buried in the nearby town church, not far from the Baron de Roulecourt, who was also killed. His invasion, a failure. The Battle of Jersey is commemorated in an evocative picture called The Death of Major Pearson by John Singleton Copley, and it's a much-admired work. And it's precisely because of the battle immortalized in that famous painting that Jersey has remained to this day so firmly, resolutely, and finally, very British. Yet another building designed to repel the French is Fort Regent, high above St. Helier, and that's where we've invited the people of Jersey to come today to meet the experts of the Antiques Roadshow. And a particularly warm welcome back to John Bly, joining us for the first time this series, as is Victoria Leatham. But we start today with Henry Sandin.
A lovely lot of slipware. I love slipware. It's sort of a red clay with a slip of a different colour and then another coloured slip to decorate the surface of that, and then covered with a lead glaze, which gives it this glowing, wonderful colour. Have you had these a long time?
Well, my husband's mother bought them in the early 30s, so we've had them in the family ever since.
Yes, it's bought on the island, or?
No, outside Birmingham.
That's interesting, because of course these aren't local here. They're from the Midlands. They're from Staffordshire.
Oh, are they?
These are Staffordshire slipwares.
Yes.
Very, very famous things. And
is it true that the design is made with a finger? Like
no.
Not.
The design is trailed, like you would decorate an ice cake.
Yes.
You have a little squeezing bag or a little trailer with liquid clay, and you just let it go like that.
Pipe it on. Really?
And sometimes you have a double trailer with three nozzles like this one, and you just go like that.
Yes.
And
interesting.
it's so simple as a decoration, but skillfully difficult to do. And some of them are very, very fine. This one is a little bit damaged. This pretty little tiny chap, isn't it? It's cracked.
Shame. Yes.
But it's been going, I suppose, since about 1680, 1700. But one thing I'm going to say is, can you put your hand out? Naughty. Putting these wires on. Did you put the wires on?
No, I don't know. I suppose my husband perhaps had them put on.
They
to hang them up.
Really be hung.
Shouldn't they?
No, they're flat things for going flat on the table. I don't know whether that set up the damage. This is rather badly cracked and perhaps should be looked after and carefully restored. But they're lovely. Have you had them valued at any stage?
We have had them valued for probate when my husband died 5 years ago, and they were valued for £300.
What each one?
No, the four, actually.
But a good condition one like this is going to be, each of these three going to be about £1,000 apiece. And the little one would have been equally that, or even more, because it's rarer to have very small ones. Little delicate ones, but he is badly damaged, so he's about a couple of £100.
Oh,
but beautiful. Look after them.
Thank you
and
very
don't
much.
go hanging them up on the wall.
Oh dear, we have to find a new home for them.
They've got to have a better home than that.
Well, I bought it in a group of belt buckles in an auction. In actual fact, I was more interested in one particular belt buckle, which was one of these silver filigree nurses' buckles, you know. But that one is one that struck my fancy rather, because it was obviously something entirely different.
That's right. I mean, can you remember what you paid for the nurse's belt buckle?
Well, the whole lot, I think, was about £20, £25, something like that.
I think that's a very good buy, because this is actually the breast ornament of an African king. It's made of almost pure gold, and it's really a very exciting object indeed. It's made by a tribe called the Ashanti, and who lived in Ghana, and in a process called lost wax. And it's a casting, so this delicate tracery that we see here is not true filigree, but it was probably sculpted in wax and then the wax burnt away and to make a mould. It would have been suspended on a silk rope, perhaps, to be worn on the chest as a statement of status. The Ashantis were a very violent nation, actually. I mean, they were very punitive and very aggressive. And in 1863 and in 1874, Queen Victoria rather took against them and started a jolly good old war with them, at which we were, needless to say, successful. And in 1874, a large quantity of Ashanti gold was brought to Garrard's, the crown jewels in Regent Street. But the interesting thing about that particular showing of the Ashanti gold was that it inspired the London jewellers to make things in that manner. So there's English necklaces and brooches in the Ashanti style. It's been made into a belt buckle, the style of which is about 1900. It's made of silver gilt, and it's been laid onto the back of the jewel in quite a neat, nice way to make it wearable by an Edwardian lady. And I think that may have been detrimental to its value to a certain extent. We have to examine how easy it's going to be to take that away. The next big question is, does it really come from the 1874 hoard? If it does, it's something really very special. And I think probably a value of about £2,000, £3,000 might be more the thing.
Yes.
That's good news for you.
It is good news, yeah.
Thank you very much for bringing it.
Oh, I'm much obliged to you. Thank you very much.
Why did you bring this in?
Well, we had a choice of something out of a will, so we chose this, and I just wondered if he was worth anything or...
If it was worth anything? That was your primary concern, was it?
Not when we chose it, no, but when we heard you were coming.
You chose it because you liked it?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. What did you think it was?
I think it's terracotta, but I'm not sure.
Where do you think it might have come from?
I thought it might be Chinese.
Yeah, it is Chinese. What it's trying to be is a Tang horse. Tang is a dynasty which ran from the 7th to the 10th century. During the Tang period, there were enormous numbers of people coming from all over Asia, and they brought with them these horses. And these figures, which come from this size right up to this size, are massive, great things. In fact, the record price at auction for any ceramic object is a Tang horse, which fetched £3.9 million. Now, these things were burial goods. The idea was, when somebody died, if you go back to the Shang dynasty, which is about 1500 BC, they actually buried the real horses and the real servants with it. This was slightly on the expensive side. So they started to make little representations, much as they do in Egypt. And these were buried, and according to your status and your wealth, so you got a larger and a better horse, or whatever it might be. And they stayed in the soil until the early years of this century. And then the railways were being pushed across China, and they started to excavate these tombs. And these came across, I think the first Tang pieces reached England in about 1910 or something like that. So before that, we got no knowledge of them at all. Once they got it, everybody was amazed by these wonderful sculptures. And they immediately became expensive. They're usually in this form, a horse standing four square, decorated in straw glaze, green glaze, and a sort of brownie colour, which we call sansai, which means three colours. Sometimes you get a blue, which is actually quite rare. Caused an impact, and the supply couldn't keep up with the demand. And once that happens, naughty people are going to come along and start copying them. And that's exactly what this is. This is a copy, probably from the 1920s, one can't actually be sure. How do we tell? Well, there are a variety of ways of telling. The most obvious one about this one is the quality of the modelling of the features, the mane, these tassels on here. are simply not good enough. He's not hollow, he's solid, and they were hollow. This is not a typical base at all. So there's a whole raft of things wrong with it. This one, I have to say, after all that, is worth terribly little. About £100.
Oh, that's good. You'll still go back and cover.
Nice story, though.
It is,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I did know that it, in fact, was a letter by Nelson. It's written in his left hand, as you can see, and it's written from Merton, which is in Surrey, and it is where he shared a house with Lady Hamilton and her husband. And it's written in 1802, and it is a very charming letter saying thank you for being so nice to me. I mean, he's wonderful here. To be invited to be a member of your society. And I can only hope, he goes on, that the Odd Club, with its has honour for its pilot and truth for its rudder, so it goes on to say that it couldn't be any better than that. He then signs it, your obedient servant, Nelson and Bronte. Now, who is this William Mobbs? Do we know?
We presume it's a member of our family.
So it's been in your family for...
approximately 193 years.
Absolutely lovely, yes. The nice thing about it, and the nasty thing about it, is on the other side. Look, there is the integral envelope. This was an envelope just written on the other side of the paper, and somebody has at some stage lacquered it or done something really horrible to it, which is soaked into the paper. Yes. It's lovely to have this envelope because it's all in his hand, and he's signed it again, and he sent it to William Mobbs, the 7 Stars, Birmingham, and with his signature there again, which I think is lovely. Well, it's a very nice letter. It's eminently frameable, all on one side. It does need cleaning, which would require a little bit of money, but it's going to be worth in the region of about £2,000. Right. Thanks for bringing it in.
Thank you.
What do you think that is?
Well, it's a pistol of some kind, isn't it? Goodness me, I mean, when I say a pistol, did anything ever come out of there? It's a huge caliber, isn't it? So it's a pistol. It was meant to scare something, was it?
Yes.
How? In what circumstances?
Well,
Who did it scare?
Picture yourself as a Victorian gentleman, travelling, maybe stopping at a wayside inn. He retires to bed, uncertain of his circumstances or the security. He would take the wise precaution of setting this up before he went to bed. You would close your door, you would set it by the door, and you would use a contemporary cap. And if anybody should come and open the door, it would do that.
Scaring the burglar.
And waking you up.
Well, as
Waking you
everybody
up.
else in this hall. Wonderful.
Well, my parents started me off at the age of, I think it was about 11 or 12, and that's when I started going into the Sea Cadets. So I thought I'd better start. They started me off with a Turkish naval sword.
I picked out these few because we have a representation of the British Navy, the British Indian Navy, the Italian Navy, the Imperial German Navy. So you must go on and get one now of the American Navy, etc., etc., etc. But what does intrigue me is the naval dirks, because a midshipman, when he enters the service, invariably he was from a well-connected family, and what better present to buy the young midshipman from his relatives is his dirk.
Right.
Now, this is one of the reasons you very, very rarely find 2 dirks exactly the same, because the cutlers used to put in their expertise and their own license, and of course, just on this table, I mean, that one is totally different from this one, etc., right the way through. But the one I do like most of all, where is he now? Oh, here he is this blued and gilt dirk. Now, I think I ought to mention that in Georgian times, when they did this mercuric gilding, there were more fatalities in the cutlery trade than any other trade in London, because the lads used to get the blades out of the vats, and I suppose instead of putting marston on, you know what boys are, 10 and 12 years old, they would just hold their breath, and of course the mercury got into their lungs, and that was that. So they made it illegal to do this process. But of course this gilding is truly magnificent. I don't think you'll see the like of it today. So that little item must have been quite expensive at the time. As regards values, I suppose you've bought them over the years, so your own valuations would vary considerably. usually you find that naval swords would average about 300 pounds. But the little dirks, they can go anything from 150 pounds up to 500 or 600. And for this little joker, you will have to pay your 600 today.
Really?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, that is a little charmer.
I think the first thing that strikes you about this is its size. And it's such a compact, and if I dare say, pretty piece of furniture. From the period of William and Mary, Queen Anne, that sort of turn of the 17th into the 18th century. Delightful thing. How long have you had it?
Oh, about 50 years. My husband bought it at auction. We lived near Guildford at that time, and most of our home came from auctions because you could only buy utility furniture.
Right, in those days. My goodness. Well, bought at the right time, of course.
Yes.
Now, there is a problem with furniture of this period. Because it is rare and this is a desirable size, we have to look and see, before giving a value, whether or not it could have been cut down or made more attractive at some time. Unlike a piece of silver or porcelain, which are exactly the same now as when they were made, furniture is always altered a little bit. Oh, these are nice. I love this hand.
Colour's darker, isn't it? It's faded.
Yes, yes. Beautiful choice of timber.
Walnut,
take one of these out. Walnut fronts.
Yes.
It's had some other handles on, but this very nice indeed. Nice thick veneers, you see, nice hand-cut veneers.
Oh, yes.
When this was made, the veneers had to be a 16th of an inch thick, no thicker. They couldn't cut thinner than that. Only in the 19th century do you find paper-thin veneers. So that little bit is a good guide to authenticity. Got a secret compartment. Excellent. I think that's
three drawers behind
three
it.
little drawers behind it. Yes. That may well have been replaced at some time. These were always prone to damage. The reason is that was almost a little piece of furniture in its own, and some families weren't as honest as we are today. Though somebody would come in on the death of the owner and just take the little bit. Absolutely, left with a great hole.
Yes, they certainly didn't leave any for me.
No, I've never found any money in one either. No. That's a nice old lock. That fan shape, like a dovetail shape, very, very typical of good work of the sort of 1690, 1700. So we're really confirming sort of it's got a cushion drawer.
Yes.
Good. And that's good too because it's backed with pine, which all good English furniture at this time was. So veneered with walnut onto pine, excellent. And I'm going to pull one more drawer out. That's not so good. Now look.
It's been repaired, or?
Well, you've got a drawer lining that once ran from side to side. So this is a piece of old timber which somebody has put in there. It's a bit of a rebuild, that drawer. It doesn't matter, does it, really? I mean, 1700, 1690, 1700, we're entitled to a bit of a rebuild, I think. No problem there. Then these are always suspect, these stands, because of their very construction. These were made on a pole lathe.
Yes.
So somebody had to work their foot up and down and create these intricate patterns. And it's a cracking little bit of furniture. Having proved, really without too much concern, that it is authentic and there's nothing wrong, nothing seriously wrong with it, you have to think of the value. Well, a little William and Mary piece, this quality, this size particularly, would have to be insured today for £12,500. All right?
Yes, yes.
Good.
A lot of money. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
My mother gave me this, a couple of years ago.
And why did you bring it to me?
Your colleague didn't know what it was, hadn't a clue, a mystery piece.
Mystery piece? It's a mystery to me. What do you think of this, Lars?
I think you've got to ask Batty, because
Batty is the expert, is he, on these things?
He's a man with a moustache, and I think it's got something. I think
it's a moustache
cup.
cup.
Yeah.
It's like a moustache cup, isn't it? So you don't get your moustache down in there. Who did it come from?
She doesn't know.
Who's that?
My mother.
My mother?
She doesn't have a moustache.
She hasn't got a moustache.
Sorry.
And there's two compartments which join up in the bottom, and you obviously have to pour it out through there. And I suppose in date, 1860, something like that. But Lord knows what the blessed.
It would be an ideal cocktail dispenser, wouldn't it? Where you wanted two substances to be mixed at the very last minute. Maybe dry martini, vermouth in there and gin in there, maybe.
Or gin and tonic, or anybody any suggestions? Anybody?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that it's a sculptor's mallet.
A sculptor's mallet, but it belongs to a Masonic lodge.
Then it's not a sculptor's mallet. It's a Masonic mallet. It's a Masonic gavel. Going, call everybody to order, I'm sure.
There we are.
Yes?
We're none the wiser.
No, none the wiser. No,
None the
absolutely
wiser.
not. Absolutely not. Very nice. It's one of the best of its sort I've ever seen.
Quite interesting to have it divided all the way down the middle,
Yes.
too. It's a very rare thing, though, isn't it?
It must have been the most unsuccessful object they ever made, because one has never seen any more.
No. It's a lovely thing, actually,
Yes.
isn't it? Would it be Staffordshire?
Yes,
you
definitely.
suppose?
Yeah.
Yes.
About 1860.
About 1860, and very unusual to have a floral kind of vignette like that in something that's kind of...
And
velvet
American
in a
collectors
way.
would kill for it because it's got this flow blue effect. And there's a whole society devoted to that particular kind of decoration.
Are they in the sort of Midwest? the
So
flow
not
blue?
only would you get American
Yeah.
flow blue collectors killing
Yes.
for it, you also get moustache collectors killing for it.
Yeah.
You'd end up with a general massacre.
Yes, it's got to be worth quite a lot of money, really, hasn't it, as a
I
novelty?
would think it's worth in the region of 100, 200, no, it's more than two to 300 pounds. Let's go and see what we can tell the owner. Not much more, really. Oh, there you are. There you are. You heard all of that. 200 to 400 pounds. How about that for precision? And as we've never seen one of these before, and may not see one again ever, then it would be a very, very difficult object to value.
This lady here, who is a Susanna Cornwall, is the mother of these three girls. And we believe that the three gentlemen there are the husbands of the three girls.
Right.
One of the husbands is a gentleman called Gardner, we believe, him.
Right.
And this brings us down to the miniatures in the other frame, where this is basically Gardner's. This chap was an Admiral Gardner, and then we've got some Cornwalls, which is my family, in here.
Well, my favourite, I think, is this one here. It's actually signed just above the shoulder, GS, which is Gervais Spencer, and it's dated 1757.
Really?
And it's possibly the earliest one here. But this is a miniature portrait in enamels. There are two here, this one and the one here of the lady, which I think is also by the same artist. The others are in watercolour on either ivory or card. They are superb. The two portraits at the top are very intriguing. I think they're by an artist called Beechey, who painted, amongst other things, naval portraits. Have you ever had them valued?
Not recently, no. We have some family inventories, and in 1920, the four ladies are valued at 10 guineas.
At 10 guineas?
10 guineas. And
Goodness.
this gentleman is valued at 5 guineas.
Goodness me.
But we haven't had any other valuations.
Subject to further investigation, because it's such a wonderful collection, it does really need looking into further. For the purposes of insurance, your 10 guineas today should easily be worth in excess of £20,000.
Golly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for bringing them in and showing us.
Channel Island silver is peculiar inasmuch as it's a mixture of styles, English and French. Is it a family piece?
Yes, it is. It was came from my grandfather down to, he gave it to my mother to get passed on to me. Right. I was the youngest child.
This particular piece was made by George Mauger, who had a shop in Broad Street in Jersey. The form is English. I would suggest about 1740, 1750. But the styles of silver in the Channel Islands were usually 20 or 30 years after the English counterparts. The inscriptions, however, are in French.
Right.
And that is also quite typical. Do these initials, which are on the front here, do they relate to family?
Yes, well, I think so. It's something Le G, P Le G, and I think Le G is Le Gros,
Right.
which my great-grandmother was a Le Gros.
Well, we've got initials on the front and also initials on the base. We can see the maker's marks struck twice.
Right.
It's a peculiar way of making silver in the Channel Islands, inasmuch as they didn't have their own official assay office.
Right.
They didn't have enough pieces to warrant having an office. So the normal way was that the silversmith would purely put his own marks on a piece of silver. And this is what we've got here. Do you know roughly what it's worth? Do you have it insured?
Well, with the house contents, but somebody, my mother once took it to a sort of antiques fair over here, and I think they said between 2,000 and 3,000.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. If it was to be sold, 2,000, maybe £2,500, but if you had to replace it, it would be probably over 3,000.
Right.
Well, now, if you were to ask Henry Sandin what he collected, I don't think you'd be really surprised to discover that he collected pots, because he is, by his own confession, simply mad about pots. But I didn't realise, Henry, that you had been looking all your life, literally, for this particular teapot.
Well, it satisfies three of my particular loves. Teapots, I love teapots. Raw Worcester, I love raw Worcester. And pots that make you smile, make you laugh. And the three combinations here in this one pot. It's the aesthetic teapot. You pour it out, of course, like that. Yes. His arm is bent in the aesthetic style, and the hand is a bit lip-wristed, because it's supposed to be a skit upon Oscar Wilde and the aesthetic movement of 1886.
And who is this on the other side, do we think?
Well, on the other side, it's a lady. I don't think Oscar Wilde had a lady friend, but she's wearing a little lily in her buttonhole there. And,
well, this is pure supposition, you know, on my part. But what I do know, because I do have the letters of Oscar Wilde in a volume, and he was a great friend of Lily Langtry, the Jersey Lily.
The Jersey Lily.
Who came from Jersey, came from this island, went to London, became part of London society in 1875, and it could well be that this figure on the other side was Lily Langtry.
Hence the lily.
Yeah.
The sunflower here is really more the aesthetic movement thing.
Yes.
So the Jersey Lily is
well,
there.
we think, unless anybody's got a better theory.
It has an interesting inscription under the bottom. The fearful consequences through the laws of natural selection and evolution of living up to your teapot. You become like a real teapot. I'm a little teapot. So, and it also has the word Budge written with it. Now, I've always wanted to know who Budge was. So if anybody out there knows who Budge is, I'd be very grateful to know.
A charming fountain pen.
It was a present from my grandmother when I was a child, and I think she must have brought it back from her travels abroad before the war.
And you've resisted using it too much?
Yes, I haven't used it at all, actually.
No, well, it's in dazzling condition. It's actually a pen made by Dunhills, and it's called a Namiki lacquered fountain pen. If you look at the nib, it's got Namiki stamped on it, Namiki 2. And until Dunhills bought Mont Blanc, which is another fountain pen manufacturer in the 30s, no other fountain pen had another trader's name on it, like Namiki, on any Dunhill production. And Dunhills allowed this because Namiki has lacquerers were of such supreme quality. And if we look at it, around the shaft you have poplar trees and mountains and cottages, exquisitely lacquered. The cover has got a gold band on it, and it's stamped 18K. Again, more mountains, and we come across another little building here on this speckled gold ground. It's an exquisite quality work of art, dating from about 1930. It's most likely to have been made to be retailed by Dunhills in London.
I see.
And much collected now. It would be very desirable on the market because it's in such wonderful condition, beautifully preserved by you.
It's a good thing I didn't use it then.
Well, it is really. It's the sort of thing I think you would probably get at auction between £1,200 and £1,800.
Really? Good heavens.
It's a lovely thing, isn't it? Good, and we'll let it go and live in its little box again.
Yes, I shall take good care of it from now on.
Bet you will, I know.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, since porcelain figures were first manufactured in Europe in the 18th century, from the very outset they were used as allegorical objects to be placed in the center of tables. This is an allegory. Do you put it in the center of your table?
Yes, we do.
You do? Oh, splendid. A dining table?
Yes.
Porcelain came out of marzipan figures. It was one following the other. And here we have an allegory which might be summed up by the quotation from Macbeth, drink is a great equivocator. It stimulates the desire, but it reduces the performance. Here you have Bacchus on one side, pressing his grapes into a chalice. Beside him you have probably Venus and a little Cupid. His aim is slightly stray, possibly because he's had too much of Bacchus's fruits. And beneath them there are two putti, two little boys who definitely are the worst for drink, if not underage. And there they are, draining their chalices. The first producer of porcelain in Europe is Meissen, and this piece is from the Meissen factory. How did it come to you?
It actually is my wife's, and it was left to her by her mother.
Yes.
Her mother had it as a wedding present in 1934.
Right. Well, Meissen starts around 1710, so we've got to decide where between those two dates this piece comes from. Let's turn it upside down. The original porcelain figures, these large groups, were made in the round. It's very difficult to make something that is as heavy as this in one piece. And here, Meissen have solved the problem by making essentially 3 separate figures. There you have the Meissen marks on all 3 pieces, and incised below each piece, B19. This is the model number, and it would have allowed the factory to assemble the pieces and to keep track of where they were to go. The colouring of the piece is perhaps the best clue, apart from the marks, of the date. The mark that we see underneath would certainly take us into the 19th century. And the colouring, which is very, very full, very fleshy, good colour tone, would take us probably to the 1820s to 1860s period. You have it on the table. Do you have it insured?
No, only on the household policy, but not as an individual piece.
Do you have wild drinking parties around it?
No, not now. Used to, but not now.
I would say that if you were to sell this at auction today, it would probably realise somewhere between £1,500 and £2,500.
Good gracious. Oh, I am surprised.
And perhaps one shouldn't be too near it after a few bottles of Jersey wine.
No.
It's definitely not ivory, is it?
No. No, it's the wrong colour for ivory. It's too grey. Yeah, some of it's bone. I think these splats are bone. Yeah. I'm quite happy with those, but I think some of these add-ons are made are cast in a mould. What a bizarre object.
I've never seen one like it. If you get the light behind it, the light behind it shows you perfectly the bone. I mean, this is probably a bit of shin bone. You can almost see the shape of the bone going round.
Because of that?
Yeah. Well, the prisoners of war had to support themselves. They were paid nothing. So they used to carve the bones, the mutton bones, and sell it locally. I mean, a lot of these are attributed to Dieppe, but I mean, the possibility is that the ivory workers in Dieppe were press ganged, as they always were in those days, onto board ship, and then ended up in prison war camps. So you do get Dieppe kind of quality carving. But this is actually too naive. I mean, no ivory carver, skilled ivory carver, would turn that out. But what's great about it is that it is so naive. It's got this wonderful verve to it.
It's such a mixture of different ideas, isn't
Yes.
it? I mean, the exotic birds, it almost looks as if it should have been made in somewhere like America.
Just like South America.
Just like South America. I think it's a really colourful, one-off, idiosyncratic object.
Yeah.
And for people who like collecting that sort of thing, I should think 2 of them would be fighting it.
Yep. What's it worth?
2,500 to 4,000.
2.5 to 3.
Even in that condition?
Yeah, it's a
mad.
riot.
It's fantastic.
Crazy, it's loony, it's rare.
Okay.
It's got everything
Great.
going for it.
I must say, I do find old newspapers so interesting. These are 1818. Where did you find them?
In the ceiling.
In the ceiling?
In the ceiling, yeah. What happened is in the winter of '85 we had burst pipes and the ceiling collapsed.
Yes.
And in clearing all the mess we found these stashed in between the beams.
Really? Now, I've just had a quick look through, and this is what I find so fascinating. Here in Jersey, way back in 1818, they had their own lottery even then. And look at that prize, £30,000, and that was an enormous sum of money, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
Next Tuesday, the typesetter must have had a few.
It may look odd at first. That's because we've got it upside down, is it not? Because I do worry about its stability, because you've got that tiny little button base, but when you turn it over and you let the light fly through it, it looks absolutely lovely. It says on the base, dome, Nancy, and then that little cross, the cross of Lorraine. And Nancy, I suppose, is famous as being perhaps the cradle of French art glass makers during the sort of late 19th century. The actual object itself, to all intents and purposes, looks like a straightforward cameo glass vase. And let me turn it over. Let's have a look at this area down here. It's quite plain, really, isn't it? It's quite simple. You've got this cutting, which is achieved by acid cutting. But what makes yours special is this area here. Whereas this has been acid cut, this has been wheel cut. In other words, it's been done actually manually on a wheel by a craftsman.
Oh, really?
When this vase was made originally, it would have been entirely covered with the green. It was then acid cut through, and then it was taken back. It was taken back to the furnace, and a pad of glass, purple on top of white, was then reapplied and annealed to the glass.
Yeah.
It was then carved away to form the outline, and then very carefully carved through to give almost a three-dimensional effect. So in actual terms, what you've got is triple overlay. What is the connection with the family? Is there a French connection?
No, no French connection.
Okay.
Likewise. No, it's just a piece that my mother saw in an auction and liked and had the eye for, and just said, right, well, I'll have that.
I suppose it's one of those things.
A long time ago.
She paid what?
I don't know. I suppose about £10, £15, something like that.
Well, I mean, 20-odd years ago, 30-odd years ago, you might be expected to pay that. I'd be very, very surprised to find this particular vase to be valued at less than £5,000.
Never. Oh my goodness. What a lovely surprise.
I've been talking all day and my voice is going, but this is the stuff that dreams are made on. It's a Siberian jade paper knife by Karl Fabergé, who's the very famous Russian jeweler who made the imperial Easter eggs for Nicholas and Alexandra. It's made of Siberian jade and decorated with a gold mount in which is set a coin from the reign of Catherine the Great. Fabergé's actually enameled the coin red and white to harmonize with the intense green of the Siberian jade. The lapidary work is really very sophisticated indeed. It's wider at this end than there, and this is a very, very hard material indeed to carve. It has a sort of fibrous texture, and the black dots in it are graphite. In a sense, enameling a coin is the worst possible thing to do numismatically and breaks all the rules, but I think the effect is very pleasing, the red with the green.
Pretty.
You can see also that it's contained within its original fitted case. And on the lid satin it says Fabergé, St. Petersburg, Odessa and London. That helps us date it actually. It means that it's made after 1903. And the dedication inscription, I believe, refers to your father.
That's right. He was captain of the base, the naval base in Constantinople in 1920. And he was presented with this by the commander-in-chief and officers of the Russian Black Sea Fleet.
It's a marvelous history. What's quite interesting about it is that it was clearly second-hand when he received it. Fabergé's business finished in 1917, and it was given in 1920, so there must have been an owner in between, which is rather mysterious.
Yes.
Nonetheless, they valued it very highly because they've taken the trouble to inscribe it and then to varnish it on the top with the history, which is not often the case. I think probably if it came up at auction, it would certainly fetch £7,000. If for insurance, I think you'd have to think of a figure of about £10,000 to £12,000.
Really? Yeah.
Quite a surprise, I'm sure.
Yes, it is.
But it's a very, very beautiful thing, a very rare one,
Yes.
and a great joy to have with us today. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll see it's insured anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Where does the picture hang in your house?
Well, it used to hang in the hall, just inside the front door, but over the years it found its way up to the attic.
So you wouldn't say this is a much-loved painting?
Well, it was many years ago, but...
It's fallen from favour?
Well, not really, but over the years things have changed and more modern things have come forward.
I see. And it's a family picture, is it?
Well, it belonged to my husband's family. My late husband, who died 25 years ago, his great-grandmother was Sir William Richmond's wife.
And Sir William Richmond was the son of George
son
Richmond,
of George
and this
Richmond.
is by George.
That's right, yes. So that's why it was kept in the family.
Because, to me, this is a very special painting.
Is it?
It comes from, I think, the most intense visionary and romantic period in British art. If William Blake was perhaps the greatest visionary, it was his followers who, naturally, like all followers, are even more intense. And this is George Richmond. The great guru of the followers of William Blake was Samuel Palmer. And in fact, they had known each other since they were 15. They'd met. Samuel Palmer was a sort of academic genius, but rather a sickly boy. And he'd met your ancestor, George Richmond, your husband's ancestor, George Richmond, in the British Museum when they were both drawing, and Richmond was only 15 years old. And they'd formed this intense relationship. And Palmer had gone to Shoreham in Kent.
That's right, yes, yes.
And in fact, George Richmond had a bit of trouble following him down there because he didn't have any money, and he managed to do a little miniature portrait for 2.5 guineas, which gave him the money to go down. And he stayed in a little cottage near Palmer. And here we see Richmond, who's turned really to miniature painting, painting on ivory, with a wonderful intensity of colour, this wonderful light. After all, he's only 19 years old.
Typical subject for a boy of 19 to choose, too, isn't it, Adam and Eve?
You think wishful thinking, do you?
Yeah.
But it is so wonderful to find a work of art from this period. And I shouldn't think it's even insured, is it?
No, no. I had no idea it was, except that it was a family picture, that it was valuable at all, really.
Well, they come on the market so rarely, it's very difficult to put a valuation on it. But it is certainly worth £60,000.
Oh. I said to my son just now, it's probably worth about 3. You and your sister can have 1,000 and I'll have 1,000.
We'll multiply it by 20 or something.
I wish my husband was still alive to know.
Well, yet another great find for the Antiques Roadshow. When we opened our doors earlier this morning, of course, we had no idea at all that Peter was going to discover that wonderful picture, no idea at all about the swords or the jewellery or anything else that we've seen here today. A day full of surprises. I hope you'll join us next week when we're off to Scotland. So until then, from all of us here at St Helier in Jersey, goodbye.